The VCT Pacific League has been the dominant force on the international stage in 2025. While both Masters Bangkok as well as Masters Toronto did have a top 4 that was comprised of a team from each region, Pacific did end up coming on top both of those times, first with T1 versus G2, and then PaperX at Toronto versus Fnatic. So the question now remains, can Pacific go 3 for 3 in 2025, being the first region to be able to do so? They do have the opportunity to do so if one of their teams ends up winning champions, but something like that hasn't happened yet. The closest a team has got, at least in the franchise era, was Fnatic, winning the first 2 tournaments of the year, but coming short at champs, not allowing EMEA to win a third in a row. So we're here to talk about which teams from the Pacific could potentially be that team to bring that region a third trophy in a row. Now, I am recording this video while the Esports World Cup is going on, and there's a chance that a Pacific team can win that tournament as well, but for this video, I'm focusing specifically on VCT tournaments. Esports World Cup is a separate third-party event, so I'm just talking about the VCT here. So this is the board we have today. We have 5 teams here. Now, the reason why these 5 teams are on the board is because these are the teams that have made it to international tournaments so far in 2025. 2 of them being winners at the top in PaperX and T1, and the other 3 have attended but haven't won. So we're going to be starting with the 2 Masters winners that we have on the board here, starting with PaperX, the most recent one. PaperX, after a long history in Valorant of being a team that is choked at the big moments, finally get it done at VCT Masters Toronto in a very impressive run. While they were a very good team for a very long time, they kind of came into Toronto as the underdogs, being the 3rd seed out of Pacific after almost missing out on playoffs in Stage 1, but ended up going on a nice lower bracket run to qualify for Toronto, and ended up winning the entire thing while going through the Swiss stage. So they had a very impressive run, and Forsaken was the MVP of that tournament, so I did put him down as the MVP of this team. He was also the best in rating. He had a 1.12 rating at Toronto. He was just absolutely lights out. He maybe wasn't statistically the best player at that tournament. That would probably go to Alpha Year and Texture, but Forsaken was the most integral part of his team, and they won the whole thing, so it makes sense. For each of these teams, I ended up putting down 2 maps because I do sometimes bring up the best maps for each team, and I always just go off of the win percentage, but then there's of course the whole discussion of like, oh, well actually this map is better for this team, and I've gotten comments like that before, so I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna put 2 maps on the board, just the 2 best in terms of win percentage for each team, so you can talk about which one's better. That doesn't really matter to me. Anyways, for PaperX, we have Sunset, who so far they are undefeated on, continuing their very strong run on that map from when it wasn't out of the map pool previously. So it comes back into the map pool. Very good addition for them, really integral to their run at Toronto, beating Fnatic in map 1 of that grand final. Just an absolutely great performance by that team. They have a 6-0 record on that map so far. These stats are of course going to change because of EWC, but this is what they are at the moment of recording. But either way, they have attack win percentage of 63% and a defense win percentage of 57%. Very solid on both sides of that map, almost 60% for defense, very good work there. And then we have Lotus, who they have been on an absolute tear on lately. 15-3 record overall, beating some of the best teams in the world on that map, specifically G2, who in the Tejo meta were just absolutely lights out on that Lotus map, but didn't exactly adjust in the way that they should have when they played against PaperX, who just took their lunch money. PaperX have an attack win percentage of 55% on that Lotus map, a defense win percentage of 58%. So 2 very good sides for them there. But overall, looking at attack and defense, on attack, the win percentage overall across all maps for 2025 is 58%. That is 395 rounds won to 286 lost. In terms of overall defense, it's a 53%, so a little bit worse, but still solid numbers. 412 rounds won to 361 lost. They are, of course, the winners of Masters Toronto, and it was really great to see that. Been wanting them to win for a very long time, and they ended up doing it by making a roster change. And that is one thing that I'm going to discuss during this video, is the roster changes that all of these teams have made. What's very interesting about every single team on the board is that none of these teams, even qualifying for internationals, haven't kept the same roster throughout the entire year. Obviously, the timing of those roster changes varies, but for Paper X, subbing in Patman for Mind Freak was a very good decision. Patman was absolutely integral to their run. I thought that if Paper X were going to make a roster change, I would have thought they would have brought in an IGL. And yes, Forsaken is their IGL, I know that, but what was a problem with Paper X in the past was that they didn't really have a set IGL. They kind of just had both Forsaken and Divide be callers, but for the most part, it's W Gaming. You just kind of go, and whatever's being called, I mean, whatever works, whatever doesn't. It was more of a kind of free system than what other teams have. But it seemed like once they just gave Forsaken that main IGL role, seems to have worked quite a bit. So Paper X not taking my suggestion in grabbing an IGL, they bring in Patman, and it ended up being the right move. He was incredible for them in both Stage 1 and Toronto, really just getting better every time he played. He was improving. Massive improvement from the beginning of Toronto to the end of Toronto. He was one of the most integral pieces of that roster, and that is one of the main reasons why they won. So Paper X, could they theoretically win champions? Well, they do, at least at the time of recording, have a chance of winning Esports World Cup. They do have to face off against Fnatic to be able to make it to the grand final, but I don't know the results of that currently because this is in the past. But if they end up winning that one, then that's a pretty huge achievement for them as well. Winning back-to-back tournaments, not back-to-back VCT tournaments, but still tournaments nonetheless. But if they end up losing at the World Cup, they still have champions, and they haven't confirmed their spot for it yet, but they do have a lot of champs points to be able to make it. Plus, they seem to be at a really good place when it comes to team dynamics, when it comes to performance of each player. Everybody is locked in. I think the only question mark is kind of Something at this point, because Something does have some consistency issues, but when he is on, he is just absolutely insane. So I can see Paper X winning champions. Do I think it's going to happen? Not necessarily. It is very hard to win back-to-back tournaments, especially with having this third-party Esports World Cup thrown in the middle of this. They're not going to have a lot of time to rest from the time of Esports World Cup to Stage 2. So we'll see how they end up doing, but I think this team is really hitting a stride, and if they continue that into champions, then they absolutely will be a contender for that trophy. Moving on, we have T1, a team that ever since their win at Bangkok has kind of fallen off a little bit of a cliff. Still overall a good team. They were good enough to make playoffs in Stage 1, but they did end up falling short, not qualifying for the next tournament. So that is the second year in a row where the winner of the first Masters does not make it to the second, Sentinels in 2024. And T1 are a very weird and interesting team, and the fact that they won Bangkok was kind of a surprise, because this is a team that was making weird decisions with their roster. They have now made another one. They have subbed DH in for Sylvan, so we'll see how that ends up going. I don't know anything about DH, but Sylvan is a pretty good player and was pretty important to that Bangkok run. It seems like right now T1 is their own worst enemy. They have a crop of very good players: Meteor, Buzz, Stacks, three players that are incredibly experienced in Valorant so far and have been there and done that. And we have Izu, who in Stage 1, at least statistically, was their MVP with a 1.03 rating. But if that rating is your best performer overall statistically, then there's definitely some problems there. Meteor, Buzz, and Stacks all underperforming during Stage 1, and I will personally never call a tournament win a fluke because I don't believe in flukes. To win a tournament, you don't necessarily have to be like the best team of all time or the most consistent team. You just need to be the best team at that tournament for that amount of time. However, for people that do believe in fluke runs at tournaments, T1 might end up being the best example of one. They have so much talent, but they keep making these odd roster decisions. I do kind of question the coaching staff overall. Autumn as a coach, I have my reservations about him. He did end up winning Masters with them, so was that because of him? Was he a big part of that? But of course, there was the whole Carpe for Sylvan thing that was going on during Stage 1, and now of course we have Sylvan going out yet again coming out yet again in favor of this new player. Anyways, looking at their two best maps, Pearl, they do have a 5-1 record on in 2025. Attack win percentage is 52%, defense is 61%. Pearl, of course, being the map that they won VCT Masters Bangkok on, Game 5 against G2. And on Haven, they have a 7-3 record. Attack win percentage is 65, defense is 45. So definitely their defensive side of that map needs to get a lot better, but their attack side does make up for it. In terms of overall attack and defense, they have a 54% win rate on attack, so that is their stronger side, as their defense side is kind of not very good, with a below 50%, 48% win rate overall. So this team definitely has a lot of question marks around them. Will this new roster move make this team end up going back to their Bangkok form? Was this a necessary roster change? Does Sylvan fit in this roster or not? It seems to change by the day, and I do hope that this team does get better. I really don't want to see a tournament winner just completely fall off after winning. I would have rather G2 have won that tournament, but T1's story with Stax and Buzz finally winning was an amazing story, and I was really happy for those players. So if they just end up having a dud of the rest of the year, what do you even do next year? You got this Korean super team. They ended up being that super team at one tournament, but just didn't look like it the rest of the way. It is quite the interesting topic when it comes to T1. Do they end up winning champions? They have to make it there first. They do have a ton of champs points based off of winning that Bangkok tournament, so it should be a pretty good safety net for them, but if they completely bomb out on stage 2, then there is that possibility that they don't make it. If they do, can they win it? Are they a contender? But we saw them go from looking like they didn't have it to absolutely having it, so we'll see which side of T1 we end up getting for stage 2 and beyond. So moving on to the teams that haven't won an international tournament this year but did attend them, we are starting with Gen.G. Gen.G is a very interesting team as well, a team that has had a bit of a struggle when it comes to having a set roster. It seems like now we have the roster that they're going to be sticking with going forward, but is the roster good enough? This team, of course, coming off of a year in 2024 where they were basically the best team in the entire world, going to 2 separate grand finals, one in Madrid, one in Shanghai, losing in Madrid but winning in Shanghai in a very impressive, I'm pretty sure, undefeated run. But they then had a disappointing run at Champions, going out in the group stage. And then, of course, they lost Meteor. They also lost Lakia, but Meteor is the big one there. Meteor, of course, going on to T1 to win a tournament with them. And Gen.G, while there are flashes of that 2024 team still here, Texture, Charon, and Munchkin all here and all performing quite well, especially Texture, who was their MVP at Toronto. He was one of the highest rated players with a 1.23, but with the absence of Meteor, is Texture relied on to do too much. In that game against G2 that knocked them out of that tournament, that was kind of what happened. Texture was looking incredibly dangerous. He was out-fragging everyone on G2. He was looking phenomenal. However, as soon as he started to quiet down, as soon as G2 realized that they could just avoid him and just go to where he isn't, then they could win the game, which did end up happening, and Texture's performance just kind of fell off a cliff midway through that icebox. Not that it's his fault that the team lost. I think there are a couple rounds you can point to where the team just completely threw, but I think that game is a perfect example of the problem with this team. They have some amazing talent. Texture's still one of the best players in the world. Charon is coming off of an amazing rookie season and he's still looking great. Munchkin, maybe not as good as he was in 2024, but still a very integral part of that team, being their IGL. Are the new additions to the roster enough? Well, so far the answer to that question has been no, especially because they have swapped them out quite a bit. At the start of the year, they had Yeoman and Foxy9 playing. As soon as they didn't make it to Toronto, they ended up subbing in Ash and Suggest for those 2 players. Both players didn't really have great starts to stage 1. They ended up subbing in Foxy9 for Suggest, and that seemed to work because Foxy9 ended up having a very strong performance during stage 1. So it seemed like Foxy9, who was on DRX before and wasn't a full-time member of that roster until last year and didn't really fit in totally with that team, it seemed like he had finally hit his stride and fit in somewhere. However, when they got to Toronto, he ended up being their worst player statistically, only having a rating of 0.88. And yes, stats are not everything, but when you see where he was at in stage 1 when he came to rating to what he was at in Toronto, it's quite a big drop off. And Gen.G started that Toronto tournament very hot. They were the best team out of the Swiss stage. They come into playoffs, they beat Fnatic, then they lose against Wolves. Probably the biggest upset of that entire tournament, and then they, of course, choked against G2. So the question still remains, are these new additions enough to get them over the hump? Looking at 2 good maps for them, Haven they have a 9-2 record on, attack win percentage is 58%, defense is 62, very impressive numbers there. Then we have Lotus where they have an 8-3 record on, attack win percentage is 53%, and defense is 65. In terms of overall numbers on attack, they have a 54% win rate, 303 round wins to 255 round losses. On defense, basically the same win percentage at 50%, 53%, 353 rounds won to 265 loss. So this team is still quite good. The overall numbers aren't elite though, which I do think is something that you kind of look at and go, well, there is some improvement that needs to be had here. For example, when you look at PaperX, you see that their overall attack is at 58%. That's very impressive, especially for a team that had a really abysmal start to the year. So they ended up bouncing back and now they have quite good numbers on that side. Whereas G2, 54%, 53%, those are good numbers for sure, but it's not dominant. You're not dominating opponents on either side of the map here. They are able to do it at times for sure, but not as consistently as you would have liked them to. So Gen.G, I do think, have the talent to go on another run of winning a tournament. They did in 2024. Most of those players are still there. I think it is just going to come down to, do these new players adapt and improve? They've shown some flashes of greatness, but I think the fact that they've already swapped out some of these players to try new combinations is kind of a sign that things aren't totally 100% right. While every team on the board has made roster changes, they are, in my opinion, the most drastic. You've already had a situation where 4 separate players have either been benched or subbed in, so it's kind of a mess when it comes to that. We will see what Gen.G end up doing. They still are a top performer in the VCT, doing well at the Esports World Cup, but we will see if they're able to bring it home in the next VCT tournament. Moving on, we have the only team on the board that has attended one international tournament. That is RRQ. RRQ, a team that had some really solid talent throughout the years, but never could really put it together in an elite way. Until, of course, Stage 1, where they end up being the best team during that playoff bracket, winning the entire bracket, entering Toronto as the first seed in their region, which as an accomplishment is quite impressive, but it did kind of end up shooting them in the foot. At Toronto, we of course did see every single top seed of the region who are just waiting in playoffs. Every single one of them lost their opening match, and you could blame that on a variety of things, but I think RQ was the team that suffered the most from that. They went up against Wolves, another team that doesn't have a lot of international experience, but a team that was looking red hot heading into that playoff stage, and they did end up getting top 3, so yeah, that's who they ran into. So RQ just ran into a pack of Wolves, and then they ended up facing off against Fnatic, one of the most experienced teams in the entire VCT, so it really just did not go well for them. They did get a map off of Fnatic, but still ended up losing it. So the question remains, does this team have a deep run in them? We saw both teams that have won international tournaments so far this year kind of have unexpected runs. Both PaperX and T1 not exactly looking like tournament winning contenders heading into the tournaments that they won. So can RRQ be one of those stories if they end up making it to champions? Can Gen.G repeat the same performance that he had in Stage 1? Because in Stage 1, he was easily their MVP. He had a rating of 1.22. I did think about putting down his rating for Toronto, but it's not very good, and I felt like I've been putting the MVP of every team on, and can't really put someone down as the MVP if he's like lower than everybody. So Gen.G didn't really live up to expectations on the international stage, but I think you can kind of just write that off of, okay, that's his first international tournament. I can give him a little bit of slack there. On Haven, they have a 5-2 record on it. Attack win percentage is 67%, defense is 47%. Solid numbers there, but he definitely wanted that defense side to be a little bit better. On Ascent, they have a 4-3 record. Attack win percentage is 62%, and defense is 44%. So this is a team that does end up looking pretty solid on attack. Both of their best maps, they have very solid attack numbers. But when it comes to that defender side, there is a lot of improvement that is needed, and maybe that's what shot them in the foot at Toronto. And also looking at those two records, if that's the best that I can do when it comes to looking at the win percentages in 2025, then that's a bit of a concern. They don't have a map that they're particularly dominant on. You can beat this team on both of their best maps, especially if you start on defender side, apparently. So their map pool is going to have to get a lot deeper, a lot stronger. If you're going to win a tournament, you need to have a deep map pool. Looking at their overall numbers on attack, they have a 54% win rate, 291 rounds won to 242 lost. On defense, we see the numbers repeat, 46% win percentage there, 235 rounds won to 271 lost. So that is, I think, their main weakness, is their defense side. They are not as coordinated as other teams. They have some really good firepower in Monyet, in Gen.G, but they seem to not have the same kind of defensive discipline as some of the other teams in the Pacific. So that is something that they're going to need to improve if they have any hope of repeating what they did in Stage 1. As I said, they only have one Masters appearance so far. What is also interesting that I wanted to mention is that when it comes to Pacific teams winning tournaments, Paper X is the first team that wasn't Korean. So the Pacific region didn't win for a very long time in Valorant. It took Gen.G being that first team to do it, but that team was Korean. T1 was the second team to do it. They were also Korean. So Paper X being mostly Singaporean, but a bit of a mix with players from different countries. That was the first time that's happened. So it does show that Pacific is deeper than just Korea. And RRQ being a team from Indonesia, it's nice to see more variety there as well. So that is definitely good to see. We will see how far RRQ can take this. Can they continue to contend with the top teams in the region? And if they make it to champions, can they do better than how they've done at internationals so far? Moving on, we have DRX, a team that missed out on Toronto but did make it to Bangkok. And this is a team that for the past 2 years has gone through a lot of issues with their roster, having a lot of different players coming in and out, roster change after roster change, sub after sub. It seems never ending at this point for DRX, a team that used to have one set roster for a very long time. We did recently get the news that Flashback will be coming back to the roster, and we also have a new player in Flicker coming in up from DRX prospects. So yet another roster change for this team. Flashback originally did go out of the roster before stage 1. In place, they brought in Estrella, previously of RRQ. And while Estrella didn't perform terribly, I think his calling style just didn't really fit this team. He was a lot slower, and I think just based off of his lack of success on RRQ, maybe wasn't the best choice, but maybe the best choice just that was available at the time. But it seems like right now he's going to be their sub, even though Flashback isn't playing in the Esports World Cup. They did not have Estrella play either, having Flicker make his debut for this roster at that tournament. And DRX did okay at Esports World Cup, but are no longer in it, which in my opinion isn't too big of a deal for this team. They are trying out a new player. I think this was a good opportunity for them to experiment, especially now that it seems like they're going to have this 7-man roster set up, which, I mean, it seems like Pacific teams love to put players in and take players out, even if it's like in between maps. Team Liquid taking a page out of that book when it came to Toronto with Penny. But for DRX, while some of the players that they bring in and out do have varying levels of success, it does confuse me because overall, historically, it doesn't really seem to work, especially at the international level. Looking at their MVP during stage 1, Hyumin did have the best rating. He had a rating of 1.12, making it seem like they did make the right decision in making Buzz not on the team anymore and bringing in this new young duelist player. Hyumin is very good, but they probably didn't feel very good about it after T1 beat them at Bangkok. That probably didn't feel very good, especially because Buzz stood up and said, "Who's the best team in Korea now?" That was hard. On Haven, they have a 7-2 record on that map. Attack win percentage is 60%, defense is 53%. Very strong numbers there. Same with Ascent. Attack is 53%, defense is 67%. So 2 maps where they have a really good record on. I especially like that defense side of Ascent. The overall attack numbers are pretty solid, but definitely in need of a bit of improvement. 385 rounds won to 341 lost. That is a 53% win percentage. And when it comes to defense, it's a 51% win percentage. 360 rounds won to 349 lost. So not a big gap there when it comes to overall defense. So that defender side, while it's good on Ascent, needs improvement elsewhere. And I also wrote down the 5th to 6th curse because that is something that this team deals with all the time. And many different internationals, that is where this team ends up placing. Even when they looked like the best team out of Pacific heading into Bangkok, they still ended up falling short and placing 5th to 6th. So that curse, it just still haunts them. They've had some good runs in the past. They did have a top 4 performance at Lock-In, but that was a long time ago. 2023 is a long time ago. This team, it doesn't seem to matter what roster they have. They always seem to be good, but not good enough. They definitely seem a little bit cursed at this point. Their coaching staff, while they do get results out of these players and do have some interesting ideas, I do question the roster moves that they end up making. Last year, it was a similar story to how this one was, and some of it is a bit out of their control. I think one of the main things that kind of shot them in the foot for stage 1 was Flashback going out, which now we know was based off of a mental health thing. He wasn't doing very well, so they took him out. They bring in Estrella. It doesn't really work. He's still on the team, but probably not going to play very much. You have this weird thing where there's either Mako IGLing or you gave it to Estrella, even though Mako was kind of doing better at Estrella than it. You have this weird IGL situation going on where Mako was IGLing, even though he's historically not really an IGL, but he seems pretty good at it, especially because he did well at kickoff. And then you have Estrella come in, and now he's the IGL, but his calling style doesn't really work well with the team, but he is still on the roster. So I really don't know what this roster is going to look like from a day-by-day basis. They now have 7 people. They're probably going to sub them out a lot. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I do not think this team team is going to win an international tournament. It just seems like they're not destined to do it. They are one of the most cursed teams when it comes to international results in the entire VCT, but they are usually a pretty good team. While they did fall short in stage 1, as well as had an up and down performance in 2024, this team has some talent on it. They could go on a run. Hayumin is probably only going to get better. Mako, very experienced at this point, very solid player. Flashback is definitely a solid player when he's playing. Haven't talked about Bane in this video, but he's a solid pick as well. And Freen was one of the best Teos in the world. Now Teo's nerfed, so where does he really stand with that now? To me, there's just too many question marks to think that this team is going to go on a deep run. But we saw teams like Paper X, who also had curses, finally break their curse and break through and win a tournament. So it is possible for DRX, but I just can't see myself expecting it to happen, especially because they just don't look as good as what they used to be. But if they make it to champs, I will predict them to be 5th to 6th. That is basically a guarantee. I mean, well, I'm not going to guarantee that, but you know. Probably. Anyways, that is all I want to talk about today. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think is going to happen when it comes to the Pacific region at the international level? Can this region go 3 for 3 in the VCT in 2025? Or is another region going to break through? If the region does win, which team is going to do it? Is it any of the teams that I talked about today? Or is it maybe a different team? Maybe Boom, maybe Nonshim. It could be anything. Anyways, let me know all that and more in the comment section down below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.